The funny thing is, you probably are going to believe this. This is something about Daryl Morey and how he uses AI models to make decisions on basketball operations. But also some reports came out on Paul George about his injuries and how he might have surgery on something. There is a report that the 76ers will try to trade him this offseason. And I want to talk to you about why I think he's not going to get traded, because Daryl Morey is going to overvalue the crap out of him, and we're going to look back at some other players that Daryl Morey embarrassingly overvalued the hell out of. And the 76ers might also get fined for tanking, for sitting out players healthy. Thank you for being here. Hit the like button one time, and let's get down to business. Hot tea for the win. All right, man, first things first. 76ers forward Paul George is consulting with doctors this week on treatment options for his groin and knee injuries, including a procedure. Sources tell ESPN. A decision is expected early next week. So Paul George plays 74 games for the Clippers, averages 22 points per game, has one of his healthiest regular seasons of his career, and signs with the Philadelphia 76ers, and immediately has a knee injury, groin injury, pinky injury, every injury imaginable. Played, 22 games this season out of 82. I mean, just a complete disaster. And, so there's that. Then there's the rumors that the 76ers will try to trade Paul George this summer from Amico Hoops, senior writer Hoops Wire. I'm not saying this is a credible source, but, we just want to look at the rumors and what this article says. He goes back to what Keith Pompey said about him during the trade deadline. And that is because the Golden State Warriors showed interest in Paul George around the trade deadline, which is why I thought the 76ers were going to trade him at the trade deadline. Daryl Morey did not do that. And I don't think Paul George gets traded. I do think that, him having a treatment, even if it's very minor, is better for his trade value, because if he's just out there playing and looking like he's totally washed, then he has no trade value, right? At least if he has some kind of minor procedure on the knee and the groin, it sort of legitimizes those injuries a little bit, and then you can blame his down season more on injuries and less on his age. And then you maybe are able to trade him this offseason. Maybe you could just say this season was a wash. He was injured. Joel Embiid was injured. It's not, it wasn't fair to put any of the blame on him, and people who didn't really watch every game and didn't really watch the 76ers season closely could definitely bite and trade something for Paul George. But I have no faith that Daryl Morey is going to trade Paul George this offseason, because Daryl Morey is going to treat Paul George like he's still a superstar, and he's going to ask for ridiculous returns for Paul George in a trade, not just because of what we saw at the trade deadline, where he said a deal for Paul George would have to be a home run for us to do it, so we knew it wasn't going to happen then, but also because of how Daryl Morey has done things in the past. Here at the trade deadline, the Warriors came close to acquiring him from the Los Angeles Clippers via a sign and trade before the free agency period. Even though sources said the Sixers are gagging at the interest, the belief around the league is he'll only get moved for a home run deal. The funny thing is, moving Paul George at all is a home run deal. But you can't tell Daryl Morey that. Let me remind you that Daryl Morey several times had chances to trade Tobias Harris, who was on a disgustingly fat contract that didn't match his skill level or his production level. And sources told the Inquirer that Sixers are overvaluing Harris and asking for outrageous trade packages in return. Daryl Morey asked the Cleveland Cavaliers for a package of Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, and a first-round draft pick for Tobias King Harris. So I have no faith that Daryl Morey doesn't overvalue Paul George and actually gets a deal done this summer. Daryl Morey needs to be fired so that somebody else can do it. That's what needs to happen at this point. We've seen too many times Daryl Morey can't get the job done because he's a stubborn nerd who's obsessed with players and does not and just refuses to take into account age or injury history or anything like that. Remember Ben Simmons. The 76ers have asked the Kings for guard Tyrese Halliburton and multiple first-round picks. This was after Ben Simmons was completely exposed in the playoffs for the third year in a row. His trade value was in the shitter. I mean, the fact that he even got James Harden past his prime and another first-round pick is ridiculous. They asked for young Tyrese Halliburton and multiple first-round picks for Ben Simmons at the time. They asked Atlanta for John Collins, multiple first-round picks, and for Atlanta to take on Tobias Harris's contract. So that's Daryl Morey's history of moving guys, and I don't have any faith that he moves Paul George this offseason. And again, the only way to temporarily fix what's going on here is for the Philadelphia 76ers to fire Daryl Morey and have another GM come in and unload Paul George and kind of streamline some of these things and get the ball rolling. We saw the same thing when the Sixers fired Colangelo, right? And Elton Brand signed Al Horford to a ridiculous contract, or Brett Brown did it, or some of the Sixers owners did it. Whoever did it, they hired Daryl Morey to come in and fix the problem. Now they need to fire Morey so somebody else can come in and fix his problem. And here is his problem. I've been calling this guy a nerd for a long time. I've been saying he knows nothing about athletics. He's just a math guy. And this just proves it even more so. Listen to this clip.
When you're making a decision, and insert your favorite Sixers decision here, are you asking an LLM for their input?
An LLM. What's an LLM? What's an LLM? I don't know what an LLM is, but it has something to do with AI models, right?
Your favorite Sixers decision here, are you asking an LLM for their input?
So we two answers there. We absolutely use models as a vote in any decision, and how much of that decision depends on, how much the assumptions behind those models don't change, and their past success rate. So if you have a highly successful model for picking draft picks, and we think that the game, Evan hasn't changed the rules yet, and so the game isn't changed.
Evan Wash, who's in charge
of
the league office
thank you.
Of defeating you.
Yes. Then the models get a lot of weight in those decisions. It turns out LLMs do fairly well at prediction. They still are not.
You see what I'm saying? This is not sports. This is just not sports. And this is exactly why Daryl Morey does not have a championship. His algorithms work sometimes. Back when he was in charge of the Houston Rockets, he thought he changed the entire landscape of the NBA by going small ball, trading away a rim running center so that he could play 5 out and just have Harden pound the rock and kick it out. He thought if you shoot more threes than the Golden State Warriors, you beat the Golden State Warriors. And then the Houston Rockets missed 27 three-pointers in a row in a Western Conference Finals game because the basketball gods said, fuck you, nerd. This is not sports. This is we have allowed mathematicians to infiltrate our beautiful game. And it's time for that phase to be over. Daryl Morey is never going to win anything because he's just going to plug in another algorithm to try to fix the other algorithm. It has nothing to do with sports. Last thing is, the Utah Jazz got fined $100,000 for violations of the player participation policy. The violation occurred when the Jazz failed to make star forward Lauri Markkanen available against the Wizards on March 5th. And so this then. Multiple sources told ESPN the NBA has looked into the 76ers' recent absences particularly over the past week with George and Tyrese Maxey sitting out games. So the 76ers have committed to the tank, which they needed to do, and the NBA is going to punish them for it. If it's just a money punishment, whatever. Josh Harris, anyway, he can pay $100,000. You know what I'm saying? If it's losing second-round draft picks and stuff, that's going to piss me off. But I do expect something to happen because it's pretty obvious that all of these guys are done playing with 20 games left in the season when the tank was most needed. But, you know, as long as they find other teams too, I'm fine with it. That's all I got. Sixers need to clean house. I'm going to say that probably every video, every day until next season starts. You got to get rid of Daryl Morey. You got to trade Paul George. This situation is a disaster. It's been the worst season I've ever witnessed in my life as a 76ers fan. And I'm not kidding. Because, you know, the process years, the tanking years, we knew what we were getting into, right? We knew they were going to be bad. We knew they were tanking on purpose to try to get high draft picks. This is the worst season I've ever watched because we were sold yet again a championship level roster, and instead they are tanking. That is all of the fireable offenses. Everybody can get fired because of that, and everybody should get fired because of that. Anyway, thank you guys for hanging out. We'll see if I feel a little bit better tomorrow. But we're back to talking Sixers nonsense, man. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you soon.